In Lucca, Italy, it seems spring is around the corner. Here is the dawn chorus that woke me up this morning. But now it's time to get the strong shoes on and to make tracks as we continue our European journey. Welcome to Travelcaster, the travel pod that takes you there. Our trip so far has taken us through France, across to Corsica and here to Lucca in Tuscany, Italy. It's been a delight over the last couple of days exploring the many historic sites here and sampling some of the fine local cuisine. But now it is time to move on, and we are moving towards the railway station because today our journey is going to take us on 3 different trains crossing Italy from here in the west right up to the northeast. Now, despite its place on the map, Lucca is extremely accessible by train. There are services going from here out to Pisa and to Viareggio on the coast, and also today for my first destination to Florence. I'm travelling on the Eurail pass, which means I won't have to pay anything to get there, except for the journey between Florence and Venice, which is on a high-speed train. More of that a little bit later, but now it's time to sit back and enjoy the ride down to Firenze. Railway station number 2 of the day is the extremely busy Florence Santa Maria, the main railway station here in this city. There are thousands and thousands of people milling about at about 11 o'clock this morning. Not surprising given the rich cultural experience that you can have here in Florence, but even at this early in the season it's going to be a bit busy for me, so I am heading further north. My next train is going to Venice, but that won't be my final destination today. One slightly annoying thing is that I'm travelling on a first-class Eurail ticket, which gives me all the comforts that you can wish for on board. But when it comes to lounges at railway stations, there are restrictions. I've just been here to the Freccia Lounge in Florence Central Station. I produced my ticket, proudly showing the business class reservation, and was told this ticket does not include access to the lounge. Nice. Well, that was just a minor inconvenience not being allowed in the lounge at Florence Station. Turns out I pronounced it wrong anyway. It's the Freccia Rossa, not the Freccia Rossa. Should have known that. I don't think that was the reason I was refused entry. Anyway, it may sound a little bit cramped and crowded where I'm standing here in the vestibule on this train, but the business class compartment that I'm in is absolutely beautiful. Really comfortable seats, laid out in a 2-1 formation, so you may get a place to yourself. And shortly after boarding, they come along with a little free snack and a drink of the alcoholic variety, if you wish. Nice. Journey time between Florence and Venice is just 2 hours. This is a great high-speed service. Just to note though, if you are using a Eurail pass, you have to pay a compulsory supplement on this service for just €12. And here we are, 6 hours after we left Lucca in the port city of Trieste. Considering the distance we've covered, that's pretty good going. Now, Trieste is a busy place, as you can probably hear, and the first thing that you're going to notice is that the streets crisscross all over the place, so watch out for the traffic and make sure you obey the signs, otherwise you're likely to be run over by a fast-paced scooter. Now, it's not too far here from the railway station to my hotel, so let's see what's happening. Well, I've just checked into the Hotel Roma, which is very close to Trieste Central Station. Gotta say, though, it's seen better days. Faded glory is the word, and I mean, there's not even any free water or tea or coffee. There's 2 glasses, that's about it. The bed is soft and squeaky, and the bathroom, well, Here, might be able to fit half of me in that shower tray. When you're on a long trip like this, it's all about the choices that you make. And I chose, in the end, not to stay at the Hotel Roma. Not only was it grotty, but when I turned the aircon on to cold, it was blowing hot air. When I mentioned this to the guy at reception, he gave me a load more hot air, saying that, well, the aircon in Italy doesn't work until at least the summer, not in April. That's nonsense. Utter nonsense. Aircon should be fully adjustable. And here I am in a hotel just around the corner that's got working aircon and free tea and coffee. And I've only paid €15 more a night for the privilege. I've opted to stay in the NH Collection in Trieste, which is the same brand as I stayed in Marseille. And don't get me wrong, I like independent hotels, I like supporting independent businesses where I can, and I don't expect absolute luxury everywhere I go, especially for the price I pay. But I do expect basic standards, and that includes cleanliness and politeness of the staff. There was neither of those things at the Hotel Roma, and I won't be recommending it to anybody either. So, very pleased with my alternative choice of hotel. I've just taken a 10-minute walk along the waterfront here of the port of Trieste. It is a massive place, and here is one of the biggest piazzas that you will see in northern Italy. The Piazza of the Unification of Italy, which is interesting, as we'll find out a little bit later, because when it comes to unification, Trieste didn't always fall into line, but this is a vast area, and right at the top of it is a statue, and behind it a palace, the regional commune for this area, the local seat of government. And on either side of the plaza are bars and restaurants doing a fine trade on this bright April evening. During the summer periods, this area is used for all kinds of outdoor events, concerts, that kind of thing, and it really is the centre of attention in the centre of the port of Trieste. It's a beautiful sight. It's Friday morning in Trieste and time to explore some of the sights this town and its surrounding areas have to offer. Now, a little bit like Lucca, this isn't the first time I've been to Trieste. I was here about 18 months ago and I found one of the most beautiful sights thanks to a Travelcaster subscriber. Here's what happened. One of the best things about independent travel is when things go slightly wrong, they can throw up the best of surprises. Getting off the bus at the wrong stop and that uphill walk actually meant that we went through the formal gardens of Miramar, which are absolutely stunning, set on a cliff overlooking the sea. They are set out in a very formal style. Loads of people taking selfies, want to do lovers as well. Now, Miramar Castle and its park were built by order of Ferdinand Maximilian of the House of Habsburg-Lorraine. He would later go on to become the chief of the Imperial Navy. And the story goes that he set off for a voyage to the Near East from here in Trieste, got caught in a storm, and it was at that point he decided that just there, on those rocks, that's where I want to build my house. So he did. And here it is, his grand home, right on the top of the cliff, overlooking Trieste and the Gulf of Trieste itself. It's a beautiful sight. Now, it's going to cost you about €13 to get in, but here's a tip. The grounds are free to walk around as you please, so you could have a really good cheap day out here. Yeah, Miramare Castle, well worth a few hours of your time if you're here in Trieste. Now, though, we're going to try and explore a whole different form of transport in a Travelcaster first. Around Europe and the rest of the world, we've been on trams, we've been on trains, we've been on funicular railways, but we've never been on a form of public transport that does all three in one. Welcome to the Opicina Tramway. And just 15 minutes later, we've climbed up from the centre of Trieste And about halfway up, this tram, which is made of wood, looks like it comes from the 19th century, but it's probably a bit newer, stopped and rolled back. And then it connected with this really narrow, really steep funicular line. It's Friday morning and the tram's pretty full. We're here in early April, start of the season, and to get on the tram, all you need to do is tap your card. I think it's going to cost us a couple of euros. Not quite sure yet, we'll find out later. And here we are about 35 minutes after we left central Trieste in Opicina, 330 metres above sea level. And you can tell because when you're climbing up the funicular and then the subsequent tramway, the whole of Trieste opens up below you. The houses and buildings look like they're at strange angles, but of course it's you that are at the strange angle. And then as we came out onto the top and the highest point, we could see the Gulf of Trieste opening up below us. An absolutely beautiful view, one to soak in on a day like this. But beware, the tram does get busy at times. When we got here to the terminus at Opicina, there was a long line of people waiting to get on, to go back down. Another way of getting back into town would be to take one of the many bus services that pass through this area. They're quite easy to find from the tram stop. And at the tram stop itself is a nice little cafe. Time for a cappuccino. Opicina is a pretty and fairly busy small suburb of Trieste. There are cafes and bars here to get refreshments, but also I noticed a very interesting sign. It said Prosecco, 5 kilometres, and I thought, well, you don't normally need to travel that far to get a glass of fizz in Italy, but it turns out that Prosecco, the village that gave the wine its name, is quite close by. And yeah, you can get a bus from here in Opicina that'll take you there in about 25 minutes. It might be worth exploring on a future visit. I've got other plans for today though. You're listening to Travelcaster today, coming to you from the Italian port city of Trieste. To find out how we got here and what to do when you arrive, check out travelcaster.blog. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. Now, away from the centre of Trieste, everything is either up or down a hill. Fortunately, as well as the ancient tram, there is plenty of public transport on offer, and a single ticket will cost you less than €2. I decided to come down the hill via bus now, to link to another bus to get me to my next destination, which hopefully is going to be one of the highlights of my visit here today. And as soon as we get off the bus, the bells are ready to welcome us to Castello da San Giusto, the castle of St. Just. And yeah, it's a real castle, complete with ornate gardens and a whole load of history outside and inside, which we're about to discover. The bus journey from the centre of Trieste took us about 20 minutes, and just like the tram, went up many winding streets, perilous hairpin bends. Goodness knows how they get around the traffic in this town, but I'm very pleased for it. Now, whenever you visit a historical location like this, there is so much history to learn that it's difficult to take it all in. So I've asked AI to give me a brief introduction to San Giusto Castle. Perched on a hill overlooking Trieste, my assistant said, is this historic fortress with roots dating back to the 15th century. Built by the Habsburgs, it served as a defensive stronghold and later as a garrison and a prison. Today it houses a museum showcasing historical artifacts, including an impressive armoury. And here, inside the armoury, is a little bit of a link to a previous leg of our trip, because there are loads of swords here. Each one has got its own little description below, and some of them are called the Corsec, named most likely after the Italian foot soldiers who came from the island of Corsica. They're pretty sharp, brutal-looking instruments, and they were designed to inflict a fatal frontal blow to the enemy. You'd know about it if one of these hit you. But history didn't start here in the 15th century, because just outside the castle, to the right of the war memorial, you'll see the remains of a Roman forum. There are clear remnants of colonnades that would have risen into the sky. Just the stumps remain nowadays. And it may not be the most impressive set of Roman remains in the world, but they're certainly visible and they're certainly real. And once again, if you're just coming to the grounds here, they're free to see. So far during this trip, my AI assistant hasn't really let me down, but today it has really done the trick of suggesting somewhere that I may not have visited. San Giusto Castle is not only a fascinating bit of history with all of its armoury and legacy inside, but outside you can climb up on the ramparts, walk along the walls, and drink in panoramic views of Trieste and its hills behind. It's time for another Travelcaster tip, this to do with bus travel in Trieste. Today I got the 24 bus up from town here to San Giusto Castle, and it cost me €1.70. Now you may see a hop-on hop-off tour advertised for €17 a day, which gives you unlimited travel to hop on and hop off the tourist bus. But a better option is to get a day ticket for Trieste public transport system, which costs you just €4.70. It's the same deal, 24 hours of travel and more buses that you can use. After the relative peace and quiet of Lucca, it is nice to be somewhere where there's a bit of life. And Trieste is like anywhere else in Italy, where at about 6 o'clock, or maybe a bit earlier, everybody has a nice evening drink, the aperitivo hour, which is often accompanied by a passeggiata, a bit of a walk, that kind of thing. And here on the Via Borsa in Trieste is one of the best places to experience that bit of people watching, those early evening drinks. And if you fancy a bite to eat, I can highly recommend the Bar Buffet Borsa. It's the second time I've been there. And tonight I had a delicacy known as a Ljubljanska. Because what you've got to remember is that Trieste is very close to the Slovenian border, and the Ljubljanska is a bit like a schnitzel, but if you imagine the battered meat, and then in the centre of it add some cheese and ham, then you have a Ljubljanska. They are delicious, and it turns out quite good value. €16 for a big one. They only come in one size, big. In many places I've visited across Italy, the most common language I've heard spoken is English, and particularly with an American accent. Not so here in Trieste. That's because many Italians come here for their holidays, in particular those from Venice, trying to escape the hordes of tourists invading their own city most summers. And so perhaps it's no coincidence that Trieste has its own version of the Grand Canal, stretching from the waterfront into the city. It's less than 1 kilometre long. It's not as impressive or as extensive as the canal network in Venice, but it is pretty nevertheless. And it ends with a spectacular pool with fountains in front of an enormous church. If you're here at the right time of day, it's an amazing place to watch the sunset, getting a perfect photograph of the water shimmering against the sky. It's always nice to meet a fellow writer on my travels, and many of them came here to Trieste. And on the bridge over the Grand Canal is a statue of perhaps one of the most famous of them all, James Joyce. The Irish writer lived here for well over a decade and worked on Ulysses and Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man right here in this city. As I say, he's one of many famous writers who came to this place inspired by its melting pot of cultures, Slavic, Germanic, Romantic. They all met here.
You know what they say, it's better that way, so you better hush and walk away.
Outside the Borso, the central bank, is a place where people have gathered for years and years. And today there are some nice cafe bars and some music going on in the background. But if you do a 180 from the Borso and look upwards, you'll see a prominent sign that says "Welcome to the free territory of Trieste," and a slogan saying "USA and UK come back." A nod to the wartime, the Second World War, when Trieste was under Allied rule. But for a long time as well, it was its own territory. Italy wasn't always unified as we know it today. It was a series of kingdoms and fiefdoms. And Trieste liked to be among the most independent of them all. And some people still want it that way today. I mentioned this earlier on in the podcast, but with being so close to Slovenia and with a Habsburg influence, you're just as likely to be eating Germanic-style food in Trieste as you are Italian. And if you want a fill of some of the best, I can recommend Birrera Buffet de Rudi here at Via Valdoriva, just a couple of blocks away from the Grand Canal, where I have just eaten the most amazing leg of pork. The meat was falling off the bone. It was served in a lovely gravy and served with mashed potatoes. €16 for the main course. And with a lovely Munich-style beer, the total bill was only 23. The other thing I'll say about the place is the staff were exceptionally attentive. The manager, who may or may not be Rudy himself, was going around all the customers, making sure that everybody was happy and recommending the dish of the day. And when a restaurant is booked up and reserved at 7 p.m. on a Friday, that's the sign of a good establishment. One of the great things about travelling in Europe is that everywhere is relatively close together, which means you can get from place to place rather easily. Trieste is eminently accessible from all corners, really. You can come in from Venice, you could come in from Milan or Turin, or if you're coming in from the other side, from Slovenia or even Austria. I've really enjoyed being back in the city, scratching beyond the surface, seeing a few more of the sights, soaking up the culture, and tasting some of the cuisine. I'm sure I'll be back soon. To find out how to get here and what to do when you arrive, go to travelcaster.blog and join us again soon for another edition of Travelcaster, the travel pod that takes you there.